The issue of food fraud has been raised in recent years due to the scandals hitting mainstream media, such as the melamine crisis in China, horse meat scandal in Europe, and the fish and honey adulteration cases in the US. A number of different studies have estimated that food fraud affects up to 10% of the food we consume. The complicated global food supply chain is making food a target for criminals. Arguably, the worst case scenario for consumers is food safety. In the US, the CDC reports that approximately 80% of foodborne illnesses are caused by unknown pathogens. Over the past few weeks, we've met with many scientists to learn about the issues and hear about the academic research driving new testing methods and regulations. We've also heard about the success stories where food testing is helping food brands maintain and develop their positions in the marketplace. No doubt we will see an increasing number of food fraud cases hitting mainstream media, but the question remains, what is the best way to address food fraud that is of benefit to the consumers, supermarkets, food manufacturers and suppliers? And what is the role of science?
Food fraud is cheating. It's when we think we're buying one particular type of food commodity, we are not. And food fraud can take many different guises. The best known is adulteration, substitution. So you think you're buying one product and it has been substituted by a cheaper product. But there are many other types of food fraud. There is, for instance, addition fraud, where somebody will start to add something to your food to make you think it is worth more, it is a better quality product. But then we've got some of the more complex forms of fraud. We have where food is being sold as being fair trade, as being sold as being organic, as sustainable food supplies, and they aren't. And then you've got to really think, how can science play a role in trying to detect those particular types of fraud?
According to the scientific definition of food safety or unsafe food, is there a chemical or microbial hazard in the food that could cause harmful health effects to consumers, or at least has the potential of causing harmful health effects to consumers? The food business are trying to make more money out of their food products. So there's a trend of a very common practice that's called a food fraud, or in China we call it food adulteration. That means to add something into food for economic reasons.
I think the greatest challenge and opportunity, both in food fraud prevention, is the holistic, all-encompassing approach. We as individuals, as humans, when we are faced with a stress, we use our current skill set to address it. So if you're a food scientist, then you move forward with new food science technology. If you're law enforcement, you move forward with law enforcement. If you're business management, you move forward with supply chain procurement opportunities. And what we really need to do is we need to look across the board, across all disciplines. That gets to be very complex until we actually get together and start talking. And we need to leave our own preconceived ideas at the door and then look at the holistic, all-encompassing perspective on food fraud prevention.
The greatest challenge is the constant need to stay one step ahead of those who do not care about the consumer. And our analytical methods, some of them are quite amazing at how sensitive they are, and I'd like to get that message out to anyone considering food fraud. We will come up with a method to find you. You know, we're all familiar now with the power of DNA, and we have other methods that are equally as powerful. And maintaining the integrity of the food supply is a fundamental concern for all of us.
I guess one of the major opportunities for people working in this area is to apply non-targeted methods to detect food adulteration. I think that's, in the medium term, the best way to go, because it gives you the power to actually detect a large range of irregularities. It has disadvantages, of course, when it comes to litigation, for example, but I don't think we should be focusing all the time on litigation as a desirable outcome. In relation to where the challenges lie, I think it's marrying the needs and the expectations of the scientist and the businessman. Because in the laboratory we produce models, we quantify accuracy in terms of correct classifications and identifications and so on, and we're all very comfortable with 90 or 95% correct classifications. What does that mean to the businessman? How does that fit into the businessman's decision-making process when it comes to allowing product to leave the plant or allowing raw material to come into the plant? So it's where those worlds collide, I think, is the interesting and exciting part of the future.
My laboratory on analogs laboratories may help the fight against food fraud, especially by a discovery of potentially new compounds introduced on the market, black market, coming from Europe or outside Europe, for which perhaps the toxicological risk may be higher than the compounds we know today. So I think this is one of the challenges and probably one of the directions where my laboratory may be the most helpful for the midterm and for the future, I would say.
Yeah, we've got new opportunities to face the challenge of food fraud and within that concept of traceability. And that is actually utilizing complementary analytical methods on the one hand, but also utilizing the power of high resolution tools which are available, as for instance high resolution mass spectrometry, where you can actually obtain the isotopic pattern of each individual compound and to utilize this isotopic pattern as a tool to trace back your individual food item to the place of origin.
The supply chain and the structure of supply chains today is there's one point at which everything is checked. If you can slip it past that point, there is a great deal of exposure because all the upstream processes rely and trust on their colleagues. One breach and there's a high likelihood it'll arrive on the farm long before it's detected in the chain. In terms of preventing food fraud, I think that we need to move forward and recognise that it exists, and at every step in the chain we should be putting in controls, surveillance controls, not to repeat the work that's done in the first step, but more to give us a reasonable chance that if something is trying to be washed through the chain, we catch it, and we catch it before it becomes endemic, and we catch it before it gets onto farm.
We're delighted to be hosting a special webinar with Professor Chris Elliott, Director of the Institute for Global Food Security, where we will hear about the findings of the upcoming UK-commissioned Elliott Report and learn about future food science strategies and technologies for worldwide implementation.